Two explosions went off 4 blocks from the hospital in the middle of a packed marathon crowd, and within 6 minutes, the ER doors blew open on a wave of blast trauma nobody there had ever been trained to see. The quiet nurse everyone thought was timid took one look at the wound patterns and said the words that saved the building, "There's a second device." Meridian General Hospital sat 8 blocks from the finish line of the city's annual marathon, a mid-sized Level 2 trauma center that saw its share of car accidents and cardiac events, but had never, in anyone's memory, been tested by anything resembling mass casualty. The ER staff liked to joke that their busiest day of the year was Marathon Sunday, when the worst injuries they typically handled were dehydration, blistered feet, and the occasional cardiac scare from an out-of-shape weekend warrior who'd overestimated himself at mile 20. Delphine Cassidy had been working Meridian General's ER for just under a year, and in that time she had settled into a role nobody had assigned her, but everyone had quietly agreed on anyway: the careful one. The one who double-checked doses that didn't need double-checking. The one who startled, faintly but visibly, at loud noises in the break room. The one who took the overnight desk shifts nobody wanted and rarely spoke up in a trauma bay full of louder, more confident voices. She was 31, compact and unassuming, with light brown hair always pulled into the same tight, practical braid, and a stillness to her that some of her coworkers read as anxiety and others simply didn't read at all, because they'd stopped paying attention months ago. Dr. Holbrook Sayer, the attending running the ER that Sunday, was a decent physician with an impatient streak that got worse under pressure. He'd worked with Delphine for most of a year and had formed an opinion of her early and never bothered to revise it. "Cassidy, can you handle triage intake, or do you need someone to walk you through it again?" he asked once, not cruelly, but with the particular carelessness of someone who'd stopped expecting much. "I've got it, Dr. Sayer," Delphine said quietly, and did. Charge nurse Rosalind Farrow, sharper than most people gave her credit for being, had noticed something the others hadn't. "She doesn't actually seem scared." She mentioned to another nurse once, watching Delphine calmly manage a combative, bleeding patient in restraints without so much as raising her voice. "Scared people fumble. She doesn't fumble. She just watches everything, all the time, like she's waiting for something. Maybe she's just anxious." The other nurse shrugged. "Some people carry it quiet." Nobody at Meridian General knew that Delphine Cassidy had once been Sergeant Delphine Cassidy, a combat medic who had spent 4 years attached to an Army explosive ordnance disposal company, embedded with bomb techs whose entire job was walking toward the devices everyone else ran from. Her role hadn't been disposal. It had been trauma. She had been the one waiting at a safe distance with a med kit every time a tech suited up and approached an unexploded device, the one who treated the wounded when devices detonated anyway, the one who had learned in exhaustive, terrible detail exactly what a blast does to a human body at various distances, exactly what secondary and tertiary devices were designed to do to the first responders who rushed toward the initial explosion, and exactly how many seconds a person had to recognize a kill zone before it became one twice. She had a Purple Heart from an IED that had killed her platoon's lead bomb tech and put 3 pieces of shrapnel into her own hip, and she had left the Army 2 years later, after a deployment that ended with a secondary device killing 2 more people she'd loved, people who had run toward the first blast to help and walked straight into the second one, exactly the way the bombers had planned. She had come home and gone into emergency nursing because it let her keep doing the one thing she was best at: helping broken bodies, without ever again having to think about the particular architecture of violence designed to kill the people who came running to help. She had built a small, quiet life at Meridian General, around the belief that she would never again have to think about that architecture at all. The marathon started at 8 a.m., under a clear autumn sky, 26,000 runners streaming through downtown Meridian, past crowds of families, co-workers, and strangers, holding up handmade signs. The ER that morning was exactly as sleepy as every marathon Sunday before it. A runner with chest pain that turned out to be anxiety, a spectator who'd fainted in the sun, the ordinary rhythm of a day everyone expected to end the same way it always had. At 11:47 a.m., 4 blocks from the hospital, near the marathon's second-mile marker, where the crowd was thickest, the first device detonated. The sound reached the hospital as a flat, distant crack that most people inside mistook for construction, or a truck backfiring, or nothing at all. It was the second sound, sirens, dozens of them, spinning up in the space of 90 seconds, layered over each other into a single continuous wail that told everyone in the ER that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Multiple casualty event, explosion reported at the marathon route. The radio at the nurse's station crackled to life with the flat, urgent voice of dispatch. Unknown device, unknown casualty count, all available units responding. All area hospitals, prepare to receive mass casualties. Dr. Sayer's face drained of color. An explosion? At the marathon? How many? They don't know yet, Rosalind said, already moving. Already grabbing the mass casualty protocol binder nobody had opened outside of a drill in 3 years. Could be a handful, could be 100. It was, within the first 20 minutes, closer to 60. The first wave arrived by whatever transportation was fastest. Ambulances, but also police cars, pickup trucks, strangers carrying the wounded in their arms because the injured were too many and too close for anyone to wait for a proper stretcher. The injuries were unlike anything Meridian General's ER had ever processed. Traumatic amputations from shrapnel packed into the device, nails, ball bearings, scrap metal, designed specifically to maximize soft tissue and bone destruction, perforated eardrums and blast lung from the overpressure wave, burns, deep puncture wounds from flying debris. Patients arriving in states of shock so profound some of them weren't registering their own missing limbs yet. Dr. Sayer moved from patient to patient, but the sheer unfamiliarity of the wound patterns, injuries that didn't match anything in his training, chaos on a scale the hospital had never drilled for, began, visibly, to overwhelm him. His voice climbed, his orders contradicted each other. A good doctor, drowning in a category of catastrophe he had never once been prepared to face. Delphine stood at the edge of the triage line, and something that had been carefully, deliberately folded away for 2 years came apart all at once. She knew this. She knew the specific chaos of blast trauma, the particular pattern of injuries a device like this produced, the way panic moved through a crowd and through a hospital in almost identical waves. And underneath the immediate horror of the wounded pouring through the doors, a colder, more urgent thought was already forming, the thought that 4 years of training had made automatic, the thought that had once saved her own life and cost her the lives of people she loved when nobody around her had thought to have it in time. She grabbed Rosalind's arm. How many devices went off? 1, as far as we know. Why? Get me the wound pattern on the worst 3 patients that just came through. Delphine's voice had dropped into something flat and precise, cutting cleanly through the noise around her, in a register nobody at Meridian General had ever heard from her. I need to know if this looks like an improvised device with a single detonation point or something more sophisticated. Rosalind blinked. Delphine, what are you? Please. There was nothing timid in it at all now. This matters more than you know. She moved through the incoming wave herself, fast and methodical, examining shrapnel patterns with the trained eye of someone who had once done this professionally, cataloging wound distribution, blast radius indicators, the telltale signature of the device's construction. And as she worked, the cold thought crystallized into something close to certainty. Dr. Sayer, Delphine's voice cut across the trauma bay. I need everyone to listen to me right now. Sayer, hands deep in a patient's leg wound, didn't look up. Cassidy, this is not the time. This is exactly the time. She was already moving toward the center of the room, and something in her bearing, the sudden, total absence of hesitation, the way she carried herself like the room's actual center of gravity, made people stop, mid-motion, to listen. The device that went off used ball bearings packed around a low-yield explosive core, detonated at ground level in a dense crowd. That's a specific, deliberate construction. It's designed to maximize casualties and to draw first responders and bystanders into a concentrated area to help the wounded. In devices built like this, in the pattern I've seen too many times before, there is very often a second device, timed to detonate after the crowd of helpers has gathered, sometimes at the scene, sometimes at the receiving hospital, because attackers know exactly where the wounded get taken. The room went silent except for the monitors and the distant wail of sirens. "You think there's a bomb in this hospital?" Sayer's voice cracked. "I think we cannot rule it out, and the cost of being wrong in the direction of caution is nothing. The cost of being wrong in the other direction is everyone in this building." Delphine's voice never rose, never wavered. "I need this ER to implement blast mitigation protocol right now. Move patients away from exterior windows and load-bearing walls near the entrance. Sweep every bag, every piece of equipment, every unattended item that came in with the wave of patients. Bombers have used decoy bags left near first responders before. And I need someone contacting whatever bomb squad or federal response is already mobilizing for the primary scene, because they need to know a level 2 trauma center receiving the bulk of their casualties needs a sweep, immediately." For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then Rosalind, 20 years of instinct telling her this was not a moment for hesitation, grabbed the nearest radio. "This is Meridian General ER. We need immediate coordination with Bomb Squad Command. We have a potential secondary device threat inside our facility." Sayer stared at Delphine. "How do you know any of this?" "Later, doctor." She was already moving patients, calm and fast, directing the walking wounded and the staff alike away from the glass-fronted entrance and the exterior wall where the ambulance bay met the building, clearing space, thinning the crowd that instinct and panic had clustered too close together near the doors. "Right now, I need everyone's help getting people away from anything that could become secondary shrapnel if I'm wrong about this and there's a structural threat we haven't found yet." Within 4 minutes, the ER had reorganized itself entirely around her instructions. Patients moved to interior treatment areas, entrances swept, every bag and unattended object flagged and isolated in a corner far from the treatment floor. It cost time. It cost coordination the staff didn't have to spare in the middle of the worst mass casualty event the hospital had ever handled. It also, as it turned out, saved the building. 19 minutes after the first device detonated, a Meridian PD bomb technician working the primary scene identified a suspicious backpack near a support beam a block from the marathon's second-mile marker. Deliberately placed, timed, exactly the kind of secondary device Delphine had described. It was disarmed with 11 minutes to spare before its estimated detonation window, in a crowd that, thanks to the first blast, had already mostly cleared. There was no second device at the hospital. But there very easily could have been, and the 4 minutes it took to move patients and sweep entrances were 4 minutes that, if the threat had been real, would have meant the difference between a hospital that survived and one that didn't. Nobody in that ER, watching Delphine Cassidy work with a certainty none of them had ever seen from her, doubted for a second that she'd been right to insist. For the next 3 hours, as Meridian General absorbed wave after wave of blast trauma patients, Delphine worked at the center of the chaos with a competence that reoriented the entire floor around her. She recognized blast lung in patients who looked stable on the surface, catching the delayed pulmonary injury that killed people hours after they seemed fine. She packed traumatic amputation wounds with the fast, practiced economy of someone who had done exactly this on far worse ground, under far worse conditions. She talked a screaming, panicked teenager through a tourniquet application on his own leg because there weren't enough hands to do it for him, her voice steady and calm, even as 3 other codes ran simultaneously around them. Sayer, humbled and finally, entirely useful, followed her lead without argument for the rest of the shift. It was nearly 4 p.m., the wave of incoming patients finally slowing to a manageable trickle, when a team in tactical gear pushed through the ambulance bay doors. FBI evidence response alongside a military EOD liaison brought in to consult on the device construction, sweeping through hospitals across the city to gather information and confirm no further threats remained. The lead figure, broad-shouldered and clearly exhausted from a day that had started catastrophically and hadn't let up since, scanned the ER with the quick, assessing eyes of someone who had spent a career walking into the aftermath of exactly this kind of violence. "We're doing a final sweep and gathering wound pattern data from receiving hospitals," he said. "I understand your staff flagged a secondary device concern early and implemented mitigation protocols. We'd like to speak to whoever made that call." His eyes moved across the room and landed on a woman in blood-streaked scrubs, calmly finishing a dressing on a patient's arm, and stopped. "Cassidy?" he said, disbelief breaking across his face. Delphine looked up slowly. For the first time in 2 careful years, her expression didn't try to hide anything at all. "Draper," she said quietly. "I didn't know you were still in the Guard Liaison program." Small world. Master Sergeant Callum Draper crossed the room, taking in the organized chaos, the swept entrances, the entire scene, with the recognition of someone who understood exactly what it had taken to accomplish. "You're the one who flagged the secondary device risk? Before the PD bomb techs even found it?" "I recognize the construction pattern from the wound distribution," Delphine said simply. "It's not a guess. It's a signature." Sayer, standing nearby, finally found his voice. "You two know each other?" Draper let out a short, disbelieving laugh, looking between Delphine and the room she had reorganized in the middle of a mass casualty event. "Know her?" This woman spent 4 years attached to an EOD company, treating blast trauma in some of the worst environments this country has ever sent people into. She's got a Purple Heart and more institutional knowledge about device construction and secondary threat patterns than half the analysts back at headquarters. And apparently she's been quietly working your ER for a year, and none of you had any idea what that meant until today. Sayer looked at Delphine for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, the particular reckoning of a man forced to see, all at once, exactly how wrong he'd been. "A year," he said hoarsely. "I asked you if you needed help with basic triage this morning." "You never asked why I was so quiet," Delphine said, not unkindly, turning back to her patient. "You just decided quiet meant unsure." It didn't. There wasn't time to let the moment breathe. The hospital was still absorbing patients, still coordinating with a citywide response effort that would take days to fully resolve, and Draper's team went to work gathering the data they needed, while Delphine, working now openly instead of quietly at the margins, briefed them on wound patterns with the same fluent, clinical precision she'd once used in briefings that had saved lives in places most people would never hear the names of. By the time evening settled over a city still reeling from the worst attack it had ever experienced, the immediate crisis at Meridian General had stabilized. The critical patients were in surgery or in the ICU. The confirmed absence of any device at the hospital had been formally cleared. The floor, hours ago a scene of pure chaos, had settled into the exhausted, focused rhythm of a hospital doing the long, grinding work of recovery. Delphine sat on a supply crate near the ambulance bay, a cup of vending machine coffee gone cold in her hands, watching the last of the emergency vehicle's lights strobe across a parking lot that had, 12 hours earlier, been an ordinary Sunday. Rosalind sat down heavily beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. "You saved this hospital today," Rosalind said finally. "Not just the patients you treated. If there had been a second device and we hadn't moved, we wouldn't be sitting here right now." Delphine shrugged, exhaustion sitting heavier on her than the weight of the day itself. "I just did what needed doing." "That's the thing," Rosalind said. "You've been doing that quietly for a year. We just never had a reason to see how much you were actually carrying." Dr. Sayer found her 20 minutes later, his usual brisk impatience nowhere in evidence. "I owe you an apology I don't think I can make sufficiently. I spent a year treating you like someone who needed extra supervision, and today, you may have single-handedly kept this hospital from becoming a second target. I was wrong about you in every way that matters." Delphine studied him for a moment, tired but without any edge of vindication in it. "I let you believe what was easy to believe, Doctor. I wanted a quiet life here, away from everything I used to know about violence like this. Turns out you don't get to fully leave that behind. You just get to decide when it matters again. She managed something close to a small, tired smile. I'm glad it mattered today, for the right reasons. Draper found her as his team wrapped up their assessment, radio traffic still steady with updates from across the city. There's going to be a full debrief on today, and your name's going to be part of it, whether you're ready for that or not. I figured it would be. For what it's worth, he offered her a tired, genuine smile. There's always a place in the liaison program for someone who can read a blast pattern faster than half our analysts. No pressure, just, you know where to find us, if you ever want back in. Delphine looked out over the parking lot, the city beyond it still lit with emergency lights, a whole community absorbing a wound it would carry for a long time. She thought about 2 years of careful invisibility, and about the 4 minutes that had just undone it completely, and found that what she felt wasn't dread. It was something quieter, the relief of no longer having to carry the weight of what she knew entirely alone. I'll think about it, she said, and, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she meant it as something more than a polite deflection. The sun set that evening over a wounded but standing city, a hospital that had held against a threat most of its staff would never fully understand how close they'd come to, and a quiet nurse nobody would ever again mistake for simply anxious. Sometimes the person watching everything a little too closely, flinching at sounds nobody else notices, is doing exactly that because they already know, in their body, in ways they can't always explain, precisely what danger looks like before it arrives, and precisely what it costs to be ready for it anyway. If this story of hidden knowledge, quiet vigilance, and one impossible day at Meridian General kept you watching until the end, hit that like button, share it with someone who believes the quietest person in the room might be the one who notices what everyone else misses, and subscribe to Beyond the Silence Tales for more real-life inspired stories of the people who show up, quietly, exactly when it matters most.
Hi, I'm Gwyneth Wynne, the owner and manager of Beyond the Silence Tales. Everyone thought she was just the anxious one on the floor. Then a bomb went off 4 blocks from the hospital, and the quiet nurse looked at the wound patterns and said the 6 words that saved the building. There's a second device. I'd really love to know what you think of this one. How did it make you feel? What stuck with me was that everyone read Delphine's stillness as fear, when it was actually vigilance the whole time. The kind you only build by surviving something most people never have to think about. Nobody bothered to ask why she was watching so closely. It just happened to save them. Which moment hit you hardest? Have you ever mistaken someone's quiet watchfulness for nerves, when it was really something closer to expertise? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, feel free to like or subscribe for more from Beyond the Silence Tales.